The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber had never been so quiet. 300 of the most brilliant minds from across the galaxy sat in complete silence, their eyes fixed on the holographic display floating in the center of the room. The image showed another ship disappearing into nothingness, making it the 57th vessel lost this month. Dr. Brightmind, the Council's lead scientist, stepped forward. His tall, slender frame cast a shadow through the hologram as he gestured at the data scrolling beside it. "The quantum disruptions are growing worse," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Our fastest ships now have a 1 in 10 chance of being lost during faster-than-light travel." The Council members whispered among themselves. They came from the most advanced worlds in the galaxy, perfect planets with perfect weather and perfect gravity. Their species had evolved in comfort, developing intelligence without the constant threats faced by lesser worlds. Yet now, faced with this crisis, their brilliant minds had found no solution. "We have tried everything," Dr. Brightmind continued. "Our best quantum computers have analyzed the problem for months. We have deployed our most advanced sensors. We have even attempted to map the disruptions using automated probes." He paused, his large eyes reflecting the red warning symbols floating before him. "Nothing works." From her seat at the head of the chamber, Council Leader Vale stood up. Unlike the others, with their ornate robes and jeweled decorations, she wore a simple white uniform. "Dr. Brightmind, speak plainly. How long until the disruptions affect all faster-than-light travel?" The scientist touched a few controls, and a hologram changed to show a map of trading routes across the galaxy. Red dots appeared, showing where ships had vanished. "At the current rate of spread, we have perhaps 2 months before all major routes become too dangerous to use. Without faster-than-light travel, our civilization will fragment. Billions will be stranded far from home. Trade will collapse. Many worlds depend on regular shipments of food and medicine." He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the chamber understood what was at stake. Their perfect society, built on the easy movement of goods and people between the stars, was about to fall apart. A soft chime interrupted the grim silence. One of the junior council members had activated their speaking light. "Honored leaders," the young alien said, "there is one option we haven't tried." They seemed nervous, their color shifting to a pale blue. "We could ask the Deathworlders for help." The chamber erupted in shocked mutters and angry protests. Deathworlders were primitive beings from harsh planets, worlds with extreme gravity, deadly weather, and aggressive life forms. Their societies were considered barely civilized by galactic standards. But Council Leader Vale raised her hand for silence. "Tell us your reasoning." The junior member stood straighter. "The quantum disruptions seem to follow patterns we can't understand. But Deathworlders, especially humans from Earth, are known for seeing patterns in chaos. Their world is so dangerous that they had to develop unusual ways of thinking just to survive." Dr. Brightmind's color darkened with disagreement. "Surely you're not suggesting we trust the safety of our civilization to creatures from a Class 12 world. They still use chemical rockets for some of their space travel. They also solve their own quantum physics problems in unique ways," the junior member countered. "And they did it while dealing with earthquakes, storms, and thousands of predator species. Their thinking isn't limited by traditional education." Council Leader Vale studied the hologram for a long moment. More red dots had appeared even during their short discussion. "Dr. Brightmind," she said finally, "send a message to Earth. Request their best quantum physicist." She held up her hand to stop his protest. "We've tried everything else. Sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is refuse to try something new because it doesn't match our expectations." As the message was sent toward the spiral arm where Earth sat, none of them could have guessed that their decision would not only save their civilization, but change their understanding of intelligence forever. The age of perfect worlds was about to meet the unpredictable creativity of a species forged in chaos. Dr. James Cooper stared through the transport ship's window as the galactic hub came into view. The massive space station looked like a giant silver snowflake, its crystalline arms stretching out for miles. Despite the beauty of the sight, his mind was focused on the data pad in his hands, reviewing the reports of vanishing ships. "Remarkable that a Deathworlder can read while in transit," a voice said. James looked up to see one of the alien passengers watching him with 3 curious eyes. "Most species get sick from the quantum shifts." James smiled politely. "On Earth, we read in moving vehicles all the time. Buses, trains, planes. You adapt or you miss out on valuable reading time." He didn't mention that he'd grown up reading on bumpy school buses on dirt roads. The aliens already thought humans were strange enough. The docking procedure took less than a minute, far smoother than any landing on Earth. As James stepped onto the hub's pristine white deck, a group of officials waited for him. Dr. Brightmind stood at their center, his expression unreadable to human eyes. "Welcome to the Galactic Hub, Dr. Cooper," the alien scientist said. "Though I must admit, we expected someone older." James had heard this before. At 35, he was young for a leading physicist by Earth standards, let alone galactic ones. "Youth can be an advantage," he replied. "Fewer old ideas to unlearn." The comment earned him several disapproving looks, but James was already walking toward the nearest data terminal. "I'd like to see the raw sensor data from the disappearances, if possible. All of it, not just the processed results." The raw data. Dr. Brightmind's color shifted to a confused purple. "But our quantum computers have already analyzed." "Computers look for what they're programmed to find," James interrupted, his fingers moving across the alien interface. "Sometimes you need human intuition to spot the unexpected." Over the next few hours, James immersed himself in the data. The alien scientists watched with growing concern as he requested more and more information, not just about the disappearances, but about normal space travel, background radiation, even the construction materials of the ships. "This is wasteful," one scientist complained. "He's looking at irrelevant factors." But James wasn't listening. Something in the numbers had caught his attention, a pattern that reminded him of. "Can you show me the data as a 3-dimensional plot?" he asked suddenly. The holographic display filled with swirling points of light. The alien saw only chaos, but James stepped closer, his eyes wide. "There," he pointed to a particular swirl of data points. "I've seen this before." "Impossible," Dr. Brightmind said. "This is a completely new phenomenon." James shook his head. "Not new, just new to space." He pulled up an image from Earth's databases. "This is what water does when it hits rocks in a river rapid. The same pattern, just at a quantum level instead of a fluid one." The alien stared at him as if he'd gone mad. "You're comparing faster than light travel to water. Why not?" James challenged. "Nature uses the same patterns at different scales. On Earth, we see it all the time. The way lightning branches looks like tree roots. The way galaxies spiral like water going down a drain." He gestured at the hologram. "Your ships aren't disappearing randomly. They're hitting quantum rapids." Dr. Brightmind's color had shifted to a deep blue of disbelief. "Even if you're right, how does this help us?" James grinned. "On Earth, we learned to navigate rapids thousands of years ago. We just need to apply the same principles to quantum space." He turned back to the terminal. "Get me everything you have on ship shield harmonics. I think I know how we can ride these waves instead of fighting them." The alien scientists exchanged looks. This human thought completely differently from them, making connections they would never have considered. Perhaps they realized that was exactly what they needed. The next morning, James stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session. The chamber was packed with scientists and officials, all eager to hear the human's explanation. The massive hologram behind him showed Earth's oceans, something most of the aliens had never seen in person. "Look at this," James said, pointing to a video of underwater volcanic vents. "On Earth, we have places where superheated water shoots up from cracks in the ocean floor. The pressure at these depths is crushing, the temperature's extreme. But life still finds a way to exist there." Dr. Brightmind stepped forward. This is fascinating biology, Dr. Cooper, but what does it have to do with our crisis? Everything, James replied. He switched the display to show the quantum data again. Your ships are traveling through space that's acting like these deep ocean currents. The same forces, just at a quantum level. Your perfect ships, designed for perfect conditions, can't handle these quantum pressures. A murmur ran through the crowd. Council Leader Vale leaned forward. Explain further, Dr. Cooper. James nodded. On Earth, we build submarines to withstand enormous pressures. But the clever part isn't just making them strong. It's about understanding how water moves at those depths. The same principle applies here. He brought up a simulation showing the ship entering faster than light space. Your current ships try to push through the quantum distortions, he continued. But look what happens when we apply the principles we learned from deep-sea currents. The simulation changed, showing a modified ship design. Instead of fighting against the quantum rapids, it rode them like a submarine navigating through underwater currents. An alien scientist raised an objection. But these forces should tear any ship apart. The mathematics clearly show. The mathematics show what you expect them to show, James interrupted. You're all from worlds where nature bends to your will. Perfect planets with perfect weather. But Earth taught us that sometimes you have to bend to nature's will instead. He walked through the hologram, pointing out patterns in the data. See these quantum eddies? They're just like the currents around underwater mountains. And these energy spikes. Similar to how pressure waves bounce off underwater cliffs. We don't need to stop these forces. We need to work with them. Dr. Brightmind's color had shifted to a thoughtful green. Your world's oceans taught you this. Our entire planet taught us, James replied. Every time we build something on Earth, we have to consider earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, and 1,000 other natural forces. We learn to succeed not by conquering nature, but by understanding it. He brought up images of Earth's architecture, bridges designed to sway with earthquakes, buildings shaped to channel hurricane winds, boats that could ride out massive storms. This is how we survive on our death world, as you call it. We adapt. We observe. We learn from what nature shows us. The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. These humans, whom they had dismissed as primitive, had gained knowledge from their harsh world that the advanced species had never needed to learn. What do you propose? Council Leader Vale asked finally. James smiled. Let me modify one ship. A small one. I'll show you how to read these quantum currents the same way Earth's sailors learn to read ocean currents. Once you understand the pattern, you'll see it's not chaos at all. It's a dance, and we just need to learn the steps. The council members looked at each other. What the humans suggested went against centuries of their scientific principles, but they had tried everything else, and ships were still vanishing. Council Leader Vale stood. You have permission to modify one research vessel, Dr. Cooper. But I warn you, if this fails. It won't, James said with quiet confidence. Earth taught us something else too. The best solutions often come from the worst problems. Give me 3 days, and I'll show you how to navigate these quantum seas. As the council session ended, even Dr. Brightmind had to admit, perhaps there was something to learn from Deathworlders after all. The research vessel floated in space near the galactic hub, its hull now covered with strange new sensor patterns that James had designed. Inside the ship's control room, he worked alongside a team of increasingly fascinated alien scientists, making final adjustments to the modified systems. The sensors are based on how dolphins navigate, James explained as he calibrated the equipment. They send out signals and read the echoes to understand what's ahead of them. Our new quantum sensors work the same way. Dr. Brightmind watched the humans' quick movements with all 3 eyes. Over the past 3 days, he had seen James work tirelessly, sleeping only a few hours each night, another reminder of how humans had adapted to harsh conditions. The simulation is ready, James announced, stepping back from the control panel. The holographic display sprang to life, showing a perfect copy of the space around them. But this version revealed something new, swirling patterns of quantum energy that none of their previous sensors had detected. "Watch this," James said. He input a series of commands, and the simulation showed their modified ship entering faster than light speed. Instead of fighting against the quantum currents, the ship's new systems detected them in advance and adjusted their course to flow with them. "Impossible," one of the alien scientists whispered. "The energy patterns, they're beautiful." James nodded. "Nature often is. We just needed the right tools to see it." He turned to Dr. Brightmind. "Ready for a real test?" The alien scientist's color shifted nervously. "You want to test it now? We should run more simulations, analyze the data." "Analysis is good," James interrupted gently. "But on Earth, there comes a time when you have to trust your preparation and take the plunge. We've done the work. Now let's prove it works." After a brief discussion with the Galactic Council, they received permission for a short faster-than-light jump, just far enough to test the system. James took the pilot's seat, his hand steady on the controls. "Beginning quantum sensor sweep," he announced. The new displays came alive, showing the invisible currents of space-time around them. "Look at that," he said, pointing to a particular pattern. "It's just like a river delta back home. We can ride that flow." The alien scientists crowded around the displays, watching in amazement as James read the quantum currents like an experienced river guide reading water. He fired up the faster-than-light drive, but instead of forcing their way through space, the ship seemed to glide into it. The journey that followed was unlike anything the aliens had ever experienced. Through the new sensors, they could see the quantum rapids that had destroyed so many ships. But James navigated through them with careful precision, using the currents to their advantage. 10 minutes later, they emerged exactly where they had planned, 100 light-years from their starting point. The alien scientists burst into excited chatter, their colors shifting through rainbow patterns of amazement. "How did you know?" Dr. Brightmind asked quietly. "How did you know it would work?" James smiled. "Because every force in nature follows patterns. On Earth, we learned this lesson over and over. The way wind moves around mountains, how ocean currents flow around continents, the paths rivers cut through rock. Space is no different. It's just another natural force for us to understand." He brought up the sensor logs, showing the quantum patterns they had navigated. "Look, we can map safe routes through these currents, mark the dangerous areas, create guidelines for other pilots to follow, just like the first human sailors who mapped Earth's oceans." Dr. Brightmind's color had shifted to a deep purple of respect. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have been wrong about what makes a species advanced. We thought our perfect worlds made us superior. But your harsh world, it taught you things we never needed to learn." James patted the alien scientist's shoulder. "That's the beauty of the galaxy, isn't it? We all have something to teach each other. Now, shall we plan the rescue mission for those stranded ships?" The emergency alert shattered the celebration at the galactic hub. James was in the middle of teaching a group of alien pilots how to read quantum currents when the message arrived from the Beta Trading Post, one of the busiest space stations in the galaxy. "This is an emergency broadcast." The message began, the alien's voice shaking with fear. "Our station's main power core is failing. We have over 3,000 ships docked here, and none can leave safely through the quantum distortions. Life support systems will fail in 20 hours. Please, we need help." The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos. Beta Trading Post was over 500 light-years away, deep in a region where the quantum distortions were strongest. Even worse, it served as a stopping point for thousands of civilian ships that weren't equipped for long-term life support. "How many people are at risk?" James asked, studying the holographic map. Council Leader Vale's voice was grim. "Over 2 million beings from 40 different species. If the life support fails..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Dr. Brightmind stepped forward, his color a worried gray. "We've modified 20 ships with the new quantum sensors, but none have attempted a journey that far. The currents in that region are extremely dangerous. Show me the sensor data from that sector, James demanded. The hologram shifted, displaying a complex web of quantum currents that looked like a raging storm. Even with their new understanding, navigating through that would be like trying to sail through a hurricane. It's too risky, one of the council members said. We should wait until we've modified more ships, run more tests. There's no time for that, James interrupted. He was already making calculations. Those people have 20 hours. Factor in preparation time. And we need to leave within 2 hours to reach them. But the risk. On Earth, James said firmly, we have a saying. The greatest risk is not taking one when someone needs help. I can navigate those currents. The modifications to my ship are complete. I'm going. The council chamber fell silent. Dr. Brightmind's color shifted to a deep blue of concern. The chances of success are better than the chances of survival if we do nothing, James finished. He turned to Council Leader Vale. I need authorization to lead a rescue mission. We'll need at least 5 ships to evacuate that many people. Vale studied the human carefully. You understand that if you fail, we lose not only you but our best hope of solving this crisis permanently. James nodded. I understand. But on Earth, we learned that sometimes you have to risk everything to save others. It's what made us survive on our world. After a moment of tense silence, Vale nodded. Authorization granted. But I can only allow volunteer pilots for the other ships. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Brightmind stepped forward. I volunteer. I've learned enough from Dr. Cooper to help navigate the currents. His color shifted to a determined orange. Besides, someone needs to document this for our scientific archives. 3 other pilots, all veterans who had trained with James, also volunteered. Within an hour, 5 ships were being prepared for the rescue mission. James spent every minute fine-tuning the quantum sensors and planning their route. As they made final preparations, Dr. Brightmind approached James. What you said about risking everything to save others, is that really how humans think? James checked the last sensor reading before answering. On a death world, you learn quickly that survival depends on helping each other. A single human might die facing a natural disaster, but a group working together might survive. It became part of who we are. He looked up at the holographic display, showing their planned route through the quantum storms. Besides, he added with a slight smile, compared to Earth's hurricanes, this is just another storm to navigate. But as they boarded their ships, even James had to admit, this would be the ultimate test of whether Earth's lessons could truly help them master the dangers of space. The 5 rescue ships moved through normal space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Inside the lead vessel, James studied the quantum sensor readings with intense concentration. The patterns ahead looked like the worst storms he'd ever seen on Earth, times 1,000. All ships, final check, he called over the communication system. Remember your Earth weather training. These quantum currents act just like storm systems. Follow my lead and stay in the safe zones I map out. Dr. Brightmind's voice came through from the second ship. James, the quantum activity is increasing. The patterns are shifting faster than our simulations predicted. Nature's always got surprises, James replied calmly. Just like on Earth. Ready for quantum jump on my mark. He took a deep breath, his hand steady on the controls. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The ships vanished into faster-than-light space. Immediately, James's modified sensors lit up with swirling patterns of energy. The quantum currents roared around them like invisible rapids, but James read them just as he'd once read river currents during his college rafting days. Hard turn coming up, he called out. There's a quantum eddy at 27 Mark 4. Ride the edge of it, just like we practiced. The ships banked as one, using the natural flow of space to increase their speed while staying safe. For 3 hours they navigated through the quantum storms. James kept up a steady stream of instructions, teaching even as they flew. See that spiral pattern? just like a hurricane's eye wall. We'll go around, not through. Suddenly, their sensors screamed warnings. A massive quantum surge appeared directly ahead, a space-time equivalent of a tidal wave. Emergency pattern Omega, James shouted. Form up tight and follow my exact course. He yanked his controls hard, sending his ship into a complex series of maneuvers that seemed to make no sense. Dr. Brightmind's voice crackled with panic. The calculations say this is impossible. We can't. Forget the calculations, James interrupted. Feel the flow. Remember the water current exercises we practiced. Trust your instincts. The quantum wave hit them, but James had positioned their ships perfectly. Instead of fighting the enormous energy, they rode it like surfers on Earth riding a wave. The surge actually pushed them faster toward their destination, cutting an hour off their journey time. Finally, the Beta trading post appeared ahead of them. The station's lights were flickering, its power nearly gone. Thousands of stranded ships clustered around it like frozen fish in a winter pond. Begin evacuation pattern, James ordered, just like we planned. Dr. Brightmind, take the north sector. Teams 2 and 3, handle the central docks. Team 4, south sector. I'll coordinate from the main hub. The next 10 hours were a blur of organized chaos. James's Earth-inspired navigation techniques allowed them to create safe corridors through the quantum storms. They taught the stranded ship's pilots the basics of reading quantum currents, helping them form convoy patterns like migrating birds. As the last group of ships prepared to leave, the station's power finally failed. But by then, all 2 million refugees were safely aboard the rescue ships or following in protected convoys. Last group away, Dr. Brightmind reported, his color bright with excitement. James, we did it. Your Earth techniques saved everyone. James allowed himself a small smile as he programmed the return course. We did it together. You all learned to see space in a new way. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to solve old problems. As their ships led the massive convoy home, Dr. Brightmind made one final observation. You know, James, perhaps we should rename these quantum distortions. Instead of calling them a crisis, we should call them the Cooper currents. After all, you showed us they're not our enemy. They're just another part of nature to understand. Save the naming for later, James replied with a laugh. Right now, let's get these people home. And then I'll teach you about some really interesting Earth weather patterns that might help us map out faster space routes. 1 month after the successful rescue mission, the galactic hub looked very different. The once pristine halls now featured massive screens showing real-time quantum current maps. Alien pilots from across the galaxy crowded around displays that showed Earth's weather patterns, studying the similarities between ocean currents and space currents. James stood before the Galactic Council for what they had announced would be a historic session. The chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, including, for the first time, a delegation from Earth. Council Leader Vale rose from her seat, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. 1 month ago, our civilization faced its greatest crisis. Our fastest ships were disappearing. Our trade routes were becoming death traps. Our most brilliant minds could find no solution. She paused, looking around the room. And then we learned a valuable lesson about the true meaning of advanced civilization. The holographic display activated, showing scenes from the past month. James teaching alien pilots how to read quantum currents, Dr. Brightmind leading classes on Earth weather patterns, rescue ships navigating safely through once dangerous space. Dr. James Cooper, Vale continued, showed us that true advancement comes not from living in perfect conditions, but from learning to overcome challenges. His world, which we once dismissed as a primitive death world, gave him insights that our perfect worlds could not provide. Dr. Brightmind stepped forward, his color a proud gold. Thanks to Earth's examples, we have mapped safe routes through all major quantum currents. Ship disappearances have dropped to 0. And we've discovered that these currents actually allow for faster travel than our old routes, once you know how to navigate them. James listened quietly, thinking about how much had changed. The aliens no longer stared at him with suspicion or doubt. Instead, they treated him, and all humans, with a new respect born of understanding. But the greatest lesson, Vale said, wasn't about space travel at all. It was about perspective. We thought our advanced worlds made us superior. Instead, they limited our vision. The challenges of Earth forced its people to think differently, to see patterns we missed, to find solutions we couldn't imagine. She gestured to the Earth delegation. Therefore, today we announce two historic changes. First, the classification system for worlds will be abolished. We now understand that environmental challenges create strengths, not weaknesses. Second, we are establishing the Galactic Education Exchange. A new hologram appeared, showing plans for a massive space station. This facility will bring together beings from all worlds, perfect and challenging alike. Because we now know that every environment, every challenge, every struggle produces unique insights that can benefit us all. James was called to the podium. Looking out at the assembled aliens, he saw not the dismissive faces that had greeted him a month ago, but colleagues eager to learn and share. On Earth, he said, we have a saying, smooth seas do not make skilled sailors. Our harsh world taught us to adapt, to think creatively, to see patterns in chaos. But that's not what makes humans special. He smiled. What makes us special is the same thing that makes every species in this room special, the ability to learn from each other. He brought up one final image, a split screen showing an Earth hurricane beside a quantum current pattern. Nature speaks the same language everywhere. Sometimes it takes different perspectives to understand what it's saying. The quantum currents were never our enemy. Like every challenge, they were an opportunity to learn and grow. As the chamber erupted in applause, Dr. Brightmind approached James. You've changed how we see the galaxy, the alien scientist said. What will you teach us next? James grinned. Well, Earth has these things called earthquakes, and I've been thinking about how their wave patterns might help us improve our faster-than-light drives even more. The chamber slowly emptied, but the changes that had begun would ripple through the galaxy for generations to come. The day a Deathworlder stepped in had become the day the galaxy learned that true advancement comes not from avoiding challenges, but from learning to face them together.